really organized a great program for you over the next 3 mornings. I'm very excited about it, although I would love to see all of you in person. Soon we will have that opportunity, I know, and this will be a mere memory. But for the interim, really glad to see all of your faces, and I know you're really going to be psyched by the conversations this morning. They couldn't be more relevant. So you're going to learn from these experts that we've assembled. Thanks go to Monica Takis on our team, who's led this work. I think this is like her 3rd or 4th year pulling this together. And she's just been a rock star with us in terms of making sure that we get the right people to have the right conversations. And a lot goes behind the scenes. Even though we're doing it Zoom, there's still a lot to pull this off. So my hat's off to Monica and appreciation for the work, as well as our entire events team. So I think you're going to take away a lot from this morning, and there's a lot, you're going to hear a lot of practical advice and hopefully some opportunities to apply that and for further conversations as we go through this week. So we'll hear a keynote address from the national headquarters and local field office of the U.S. Secret Service, and this will be followed by a panel discussion. And we'll have attendee networking, and then we'll have your choice of 2 breakout sessions for conversations, which I have actually encouraged all of you to do, because it's not only a great way to meet other people, but it's really a great way to find some other partners. And that's really what I encourage, is the partnerships are really what make the magic happen in terms of business development and cultivating relationships. And that's what we love to do and we take pride in doing here at the Tech Council. So try to stay with us and continue to do the networking. You should follow along on Sched. That's the platform that we have to access the programs. The meeting rooms themselves will be open 10 minutes prior to the scheduled start time, and you'll be placed into a waiting room until the session's open. So just bear with us. We're pretty good at it, and just bear with us. It works pretty smoothly. So before we get started with this morning's keynote, I want to thank our sponsors. And make sure you get a chance to visit their content cards in the virtual event bag, which is accessible from the sponsor tab on Sched. And you should have received an invitation to view it as well in your email. So I just want to give, again, deep appreciation to David Kane and his work leading Ethical Intruder. He's been around for 11 years, and we have been close to him, and we're very thrilled at seeing him grow and being such an important part of our ecosystem. The keynote sponsor is Recorded Future. Thank you. Panel sponsors, Expedient, Gray Matter, and Schneider Downs, long-term partners of ours. Really thrilled to have them as well. Breakout sponsors, All Lines Technology, DataBank, iBoss, and Ideal Integration. Community sponsor is Dollar Bank. And supporting sponsors are Advanticom, Fortinet, Okta, Quint, and Quintel. So thanks to all of you. Really appreciate you believing in us and believing in this work. So now I'm going to pass the baton over to my friend and partner in all of this work, and that's David Kane. He has just been, a really important piece of the fabric of our community. And in building his practice, he has just proved to be accessible and knowledgeable and just a good guy. So I want to pass the baton to David. Thank you so much. And I'll be back in a moment.
Thank you, Audrey. Good morning, everybody. And again, welcome to Cyburgh. As mentioned, I am David Kane. I'm the CEO and founder of Ethical Intruder. And we have been a part of Cyburgh since its inaugural year. And in 2021, we're very excited to be the presenting sponsor. No one can really deny that over the last 16 months that the threat landscape has really changed. The move to work from home on our end has been about protecting our organizations in the new normal. For the malicious intruders and hackers, though, this has been about finding new ways to come at us due to the changes in our environments. I think it's important to reflect on that in our jobs, while we're trying to catch up on projects that we've wanted to do over the last 16 months, to understand the mindset of what the malicious intruder is trying to do as we're making those changes. We've seen changes in organizational boundaries from our networks to remote work and how we protect the cloud. The shift has seen an increased focus on attacking endpoints, our supply chain, legacy systems, and yes, I'm referring to you on-prem exchange, and the evolution of ransomware, which has moved from simply being about recovering your data to actually protecting against exfiltration of your data. While the common phrasing and focusing on people, process, and technology seems a little tired, maintaining this broad spectrum of focus is still paramount today, as it was when it was the mantra of the inaugural Cyburgh event. This year, we have amazing speakers and sessions that will help guide all of us, and we'll share a wealth of information from our local IT and cyber leadership. Finally, I do want to express that I've always appreciated how the Tech Council and Cyburgh sessions have been really a great learning experience for organizations and companies of all sizes across all verticals. And once again, welcome to the first day of Cyburgh. Back to you, Audrey.
Thank you, David. And so now we're going to hear from our opening keynotes from the U.S. Secret Service. Just going to take a moment and tell you their names and their titles, just to give you a little bit of a peek into the competencies that we're going to hear this morning. First is Greg McAleer. He's the Deputy Assistant Director for the Office of Investigations, detailed to the National Cyber Investigative Joint Task Force. As he said, a lot of words, but it covers a lot of topics that you're going to be very thrilled to hear about today. So I want to thank Greg for joining us. We also have David Smith, Special Agent in charge of the Criminal Investigations Division. And thank you, David, for taking the time with us as well. I know that he has a lot of expertise, and we're going to hear about hopefully some interesting case studies and some advice. And then Tim Burke, he is a special agent in charge of the Pittsburgh field office. And the Pittsburgh field office is sort of renowned for their deep competencies and their work, if I could brag on Pittsburgh a little bit. And thank you, Tim, for being with us. And we'll give plenty of time to have conversations around all that you're doing. I also want to give a big shout out, a special shout out to our friend Scott Brady. He made this possible. He made Keynote possible. He was our 2019 Cyburgh Keynote when he was the U.S. Attorney for Western PA. Now he's a partner at Jones Day. We had him on our show for Business as Usual, talking right at the onset of COVID, and him sharing some of the lay of the land in terms of what his office was seeing as well. So thank you, Scott. I think you're out there somewhere, but thank you so much for making this happen and for our continued partnership. So now I'm going to welcome Greg McAleer. He is going to lead this. Thank you, Greg, for being with us. I introduced him a moment ago. He has a long title, and you think I need to say it again, Greg, this long title?
You know what? I'll take care of that for you.
Will you take care of it? I'm impressed. I'm impressed.
Absolutely.
I think it's important work, and what you're going to be reminded of is that this work that most of the people who are in this space, right now, and as David Kane said, it's across all verticals, right? Every market sector is impacted by all this. These people work round the clock. They work round the clock. These are not, 9 to 5, 8 to 6, whatever jobs. So thank you, Greg. I am going to be quiet. I'm going to be here though, but I'm going to be quiet, and I want to thank you for being with us.
Well, thank you, Audrey, and thank you, David, and thank you to the Pittsburgh Technology Council for inviting the Secret Service and myself, David and Timothy, to speak today. I am going to speak quickly, and it's out of respect for my two partners here who are actually doing most of the work. As Audrey said, I'm a Deputy Assistant Director in the Office of Investigations with the Secret Service. So that's on the kind of policy and strategy side. And then at the same time, I'm detailed over to that wonderful, long titled entity called the NCIJTF, the National Cyber Investigative Joint Task Force. And I'm going to shift a couple of times as we speak, but the NCIJTF has about 36 federal agencies, from the intelligence community, law enforcement, and the DoD. And our mission there is to coordinate and integrate and share information, cyber information, I'll call it, with any partner that has an equity or an authority, or even an agency that is not a partner, just an associate, that has an equity or an authority that we can exploit and use to create kind of risk and consequence against our adversaries. Now, so that's the NCIJTF. Let me give the Secret Service kind of its due as it deserves. Secret Service is a small agency, and we kind of punch above our weight in the cyber realm. If you think about just how we are how we are organized in that kind of dual mission of protecting VIPs and then conducting investigations. An interesting piece to focus on is very recently, the Secret Service, actually in conjunction with a number of other federal agencies, arrested a very high value target, and I'll say it, on a criminal and a national security level case. And one of the things that the associates that were interviewed in that case said is, we were really shocked that the U.S. government was capable and able to connect agencies, share information, deconflict, and then come to a result. And that's a really frightening thing, that our adversaries who are motivated, that our adversaries have that mindset that the federal government and local governments can't necessarily cooperate well enough to prosecute crime. And when we talk about crime, while I like to make a distinction between nation-state actors, we hear that very frequently in the kind of on the news, these terrible nation-state actors, and then these criminal actors. And I think what we're finding now is that there's connectivity there, that it depends on whether the way we investigate that case can be determined by whether or not somebody is wearing a uniform at the time that they commit the crime. And that really, really is scary, because if you think about just the infrastructure that's available in some of these nations that look to do us harm or to gain some kind of competitive advantage, that they can at times use the full force of their government to attack this United States, steal intellectual property, obtain M&A information, or just commit a crime. And when I say just commit a crime, I'm not minimizing that. But when we think about the theft of military technologies or whatever they're doing, intellectual property, and then at the same time we're vulnerable to ransomware attacks that have become so prolific that there's a whole nother garden, an industry developing in ransomware, and that's really scary. And that goes to this idea that I was talking about before about this velocity of technology. It's really difficult to keep up with the velocity of technology, especially in financial cycles. But if you think about it, criminals aren't bound by any rules. They operate outside the boundaries of all rules. So they're capable and able to do many things that the law enforcement and the federal government can't necessarily do, or it will take time for us to be kind of empowered to do it. And that's a really frightening thing. And that is, I think, the driver behind what we keep hearing now is public-private partnership, interagency working groups, et cetera, et cetera. And if you're paying attention to the ransomware cases, you'll see that is kind of this underpinning across all these national level ransomware cases. And I'll take the Colonial Pipeline, for instance. If you think about Colonial Pipeline, one ransomware attack had a tremendous secondary and tertiary impacts to the point that the East Coast was running out of gasoline. And it took a couple of days for us to kind of get that back. But that's just a ransomware attack. And now if you imagine whether that is a state sponsor or whether that is just a sophisticated criminal organized crime group, what could be next? And who is going to answer that call? Who is going to be the agency, or what agency is going to answer that call? And I'll submit to you that the cyber ecosystem is so large that there is not one single agency that can answer that call. And the important driver for our success is the energy is in the connections between agencies, whether they are personal or whether they are by mandate. The energy is the connections of the agencies and the ability to coalesce as many authorities as we can, as much horsepower as we can, and create that mass and that gravity at the center, so that, as we were talking about this prior to starting, that the Venn diagram, the widest part of our Venn diagram for cyber investigations should be the middle, and it should be where all of the overlap exists. And I think that, back to kind of throwing some props towards the NCIJTF, that's their goal. And the Secret Service's goal is to be the best partner with every agency we can to support that national security and, well, let me take it back, to support the criminal investigations part of national security investigations and of regular criminal investigations. So I'm going to be quiet now, if you don't mind, ma'am, and I'll pass it over to, or you can pass it over to David, and then I'd like to hear what David has to say. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Dave Smith, again, Special Agent in charge with the Criminal Investigative Division here at Secret Service headquarters in Washington, D.C. A little bit about CID. CID is pretty much the hub of our investigative mission under the Office of Investigations, where DAD McAleer works. I put it in the context of an acronym, SES, which is a common term around the government types. S meaning what we do is support. We support the investigative field in their investigative efforts. E, we empower the field with our tools and resources and subject matter expertise here at headquarters. And 3, we simplify processes for the field so they can carry out the mission unfettered. I know a lot of folks in the audience, you know, associate
Okay. Maybe while David is frozen, Greg, we go to our next panelist.
Sure.
Okay. And that's Tim.
Sure. Yeah, Tim.
And when David comes back in, we'll.
Absolutely. Good morning, everyone. My name is Tim Burke. I'm the Special Agent in charge of the Pittsburgh Field Office here for the Secret Service. So just to give you an idea, Mr. McAleer there is a Deputy Assistant Director in the Office of Investigations, as well as Special Agent in charge Smith is the Special Agent in charge of the Criminal Investigations Division. We all report to the Assistant Director of the Office of Investigations. So when Dave was referring to the field, we are what he is referring to. We are a field office here. We're one of over 41 field offices here in the Secret Service has, both here in the United States and internationally. Sorry, one second. Here in Western Pennsylvania, I've been the Special Agent in charge here since 2018. I came here as the Assistant Special Agent in charge in 2015. The reason I bring that up is just to let you know that we did have a electronic crimes task force, is what we used to call them back then here. But to say our task force here was fledgling, to say the least. When I was promoted in 2018, one of my goals was to reinvigorate our task force here and to strengthen it, especially with the huge technology infrastructure and in private sector and in academia here in Pittsburgh. So along with I was able to get buy-in from our headquarters, from the Criminal Investigations Division and the Office of Investigations to really put some resources and support into our cyber fraud task force here in Pittsburgh. And also, as Audrey mentioned before, U.S. Attorney Scott Brady was a huge supporter of us putting our resources here and to help us get our task force going. So a little shout out to Scott there. Here in Western Pennsylvania, we cover the western half of the state here from the Pittsburgh field office. So we go all the way up to Erie, all the way over to Harrisburg, and all the way over to the Ohio line. And then we also have an office down in Charleston, West Virginia. So when I say that our task force covers that, we also cover West Virginia as well. So when we started to build up our task force again in 2018, we completely modernized our lab. We have a fully functioning, self-sustaining lab. We have Gray Key, we have Cellbrite, we have a multitude of other devices and programs that we can use for forensic imaging, and to include malware and ransomware. We're capable of examining point of sale systems and other indicators of compromise. Our special agents here that are part of our task force are also trained as forensic in forensics for cyber purposes. We also have analysts as well that are part of our task force here in Pittsburgh. And as as Mr. Smith would also talk about, I'm sure, one of the things that we do here in the Secret Service is that we also, and as Greg also talked about, is the fact that we are a smaller agency. So we rely on our task force partners that we recruit and that we bring onto our task forces to make us more of a force multiplier, excuse me. So what we do is we go to our local and state and federal, not federal, but state partners, and we look for investigators that have cyber skills already or that are already conducting investigations. And then we sponsor them to send them down to the National Cyber Forensics Institute in Hoover, Alabama, where they receive additional training in cyber forensics. So for us here in Pittsburgh alone, we have 27 other task force partners, aside from the agents that we have here in Pittsburgh and down in Charleston, West Virginia. And to give you another idea, I'm sorry to read off notes, but I just want to make sure I'm giving you guys the most accurate information I have. From October, just to give you an idea, from October of 2020 through May of 2021 right now, we've conducted over 1,537 forensic exams. So that's to include laptops, that includes cell phones and any other kinds of equipment that is brought to us in terms of conducting forensics exam. I see Dave's back on. Dave, do you want me to, Audrey, do you want me to pitch it back to Dave, or do you want me to keep going?
I'm good either way, Tim.
Dave, I just touched a little base on, I brought up the NCFI, but other than that, I'm sure you could keep going, and then
Okay.
I could pick back up where you left
Let's
off.
pass it over to David real quick, and then we'll make conversation. Thanks, David.
Audrey, I had to go from laptop to personal phone, so we're back at it. You know, that happens. Obviously, we're all working remotely. The thing worked. Again, like I was saying before, the Secret Service here at CID, Criminal Investigative Division, Secret Service headquarters, we pretty much carry out the contemporary mission of the U.S. Secret Service, even though our brand is overwhelmingly associated with the executive protection of the executive branch of our government. We started out by being the protectors of the nation's financial critical infrastructure through counterfeit U.S. currency. All we've done is move from paper to plastic to now digital in the form of how we go about protecting that financial infrastructure. I don't know if I was cut off before. I had the technical difficulties before, but I said a lot of folks are wondering, hey, why is the Secret Service talking about cyber investigations? Because largely they associate us with when Burke and his law enforcement counterparts are shutting down highways in the Pittsburgh metropolitan area when the vice president or the president show up in town. Everywhere you look these days, folks are, talking about staying connected, getting connected, so on and so forth. Globally, one thing we tend to see here is that the criminals also take heed to that advice. So the criminals are connected to us, is whether we like it or not, to an extent they've never been in the past. And they exploit that. And obviously this is happening concurrently in an environment where folks are still hesitant to share information with law enforcement. Mr. McAleer gave a story about a recent interview of a suspect of a high value target. I'll give you another story because I think the stories stick. One of the questions that comes up to me often is, why should organizations, entities share information with law enforcement? I like to use, visceral examples because it tends to stick with people a little bit more. If the victim or victims of a violent crime didn't come forward to share information with law enforcement for fear of victim blaming or victim shaming, that then handcuffs law enforcement, not allowing them the information they need to potentially connect the dots to bring that person to, or those perpetrators to justice. So just keep that in mind when it comes to sharing information with law enforcement. I could spend hours talking about the history of the Secret Service, but that comment I gave you earlier about the paper to plastic to digital pretty much brings us to modern times. One major thing we did last year was combine two of our legacy task forces, our electronic crimes task force and our financial crimes task force, to create our cyber fraud task force that happened again last year. And the purpose of that is to, one, refine our focus. As Mr. McAleer said, we're not the largest law enforcement entity or federal law enforcement entity out there. I consider us a boutique kind of project. We do what we do, but we do it well. But yeah, so what we do is focus on following money and protecting that financial critical infrastructure. Last year, when we created the cyber fraud task forces, which reside in all of our field offices throughout the country, what we wanted to do was leverage the assets that we have in order to make as much impact as we can. One element of that, or one indicator of that, is the PTOC cases. It's called Priority Transnational Organized Criminal Cases. These are cases designated by the Department of Justice as some of the most impactful global cases across federal law enforcement. Despite the Secret Service being a relatively small law enforcement entity and having a dual mission, we still account for, as the lead agency, for about a third of the PTOC cases across federal law enforcement. Something I'm very proud of, and something that speaks to how we definitely focus our efforts and our limited resources on those criminals and transnational criminal groups that tend to impact us the most. One of the things we talked about routinely within the Secret Service before and during the pandemic was that the pandemic didn't create any new criminals. It just provided existing criminals a new platform and additional opportunities to exploit and victimize Americans and others. Going back to our CFTFs, or Cyber Fraud Task Forces, the Cyber Fraud Task Forces exist to prevent, detect, and mitigate cyber-enabled crimes. The prevention is a huge piece for us within the U.S. Secret Service. It's in our DNA culture to prevent, whether you're talking about investigations or our protective mission. We're not in the business of having people harm our protectees and then following up on it. We're in the business of preventing that from happening in the first place so that we don't have any residual issues. The education, so prevention includes the education in the forms of working with our partners, sending out alerts. During the pandemic, we received tons of indicators of compromise from partnering entities that we subsequently in turn sent out to those CFTF partners so that they can patch whatever they needed to patch, address what they needed to on their networks, because we were seeing some activity or some irregularities that warranted some attention. Detection. A lot of the detection comes in the forms of using tools. Some of the detection comes in the form of old school working sources. We have a bevy of resources here that work with human sources that give us information, because at the end of the day, there's a lot of these like ransomware groups, as Mr. McAleer and Mr. Kane spoke about earlier. A lot of these groups are long-standing criminals that just migrate from crime to crime. The folks that are doing ransomware today, they were doing carding forms, 10, 15 years ago. So criminals are going to migrate to whatever sort of crime is the most impactful for them. So like I said before, the detection includes a lot of work with sources that give us information so that we can take actionable intel, so that we can take action against the folks. Detection also comes in the form of using some of our newer resources. 10, 15 years ago, we didn't have network intrusion response technical personnel. We do now. In our cyber fraud task forces, we have folks that can go out and respond, because not every entity can afford a robust network intrusion response entity to come in and support them in response to an incident. But the Secret Service, along with our partners at CISA, other law enforcement entities such as Mr. McAleer spoke about earlier, to go out and respond, mitigate, stop the bleeding, and do what we need to do in order to protect citizens, companies, so on and so forth. In addition to our cyber fraud task forces, here at Secret Service headquarters, we have what we call the GIOC, or Global Investigative Operations Center. The GIOC is, I explain it like this to folks, it's a air traffic control tower for our investigative division. If you see the CFTFs as the hub of those spokes, and keep in mind the CFTFs are hubs of their own in their respective districts, but overall the DIOC serves as a hub for the CFTFs throughout. Keep in mind, 15, 20 years ago when crime was more local, regional, and we weren't as connected as we are today, it wasn't as necessary for us to have like this global footprint. But now with the connectivity we have worldwide, you just won't find a substantial case in this environment that doesn't require us to touch multiple districts within the United States and largely beyond the United States in order to bring criminals to justice. Within the JIOC, we have a ton of mission desks, pretty much specializing in different areas. And the good thing about the JIOC is we shift consistent or concurrent with the trend. Whatever we're seeing a lot of, we get the folks that are working a lot and assign them to those mission desks so that when other agents have like or similar crimes or cases, they can call in as a force multiplier. Some of these mission desks are, digital currency tracing, SIM swapping, obviously we've got a ransomware network intrusion desk, undercover ops. Undercover ops are a lot different than they were when I was one young agent and I had a lot more hair. It didn't look like Mr. McAleer's hair, but I had a lot more hair. But now I just undercover operations also include just having an online persona that's different than your own, so that you can hopefully get a guy on the hook, get some attribution, some identification, because obviously bad guys love the anonymity that the Internet of Things brings them. A recent example of the JIOC and the success in that entity is we were participating in a search warrant overseas, and during the search warrant, the bad guy who was arrested, we found a Bitcoin wallet address on his phone, and subsequently cross-referenced the Bitcoin wallet address with some existing information we had from the JIOC. And keep in mind, like I said before, if entities don't give the law enforcement community information, it's impossible for us to take action. So in this instance, we were able to get that information, cross-reference wallet address, a recent, and this was, when I say recent, it was within a couple of weeks of the actual search warrant, we're able to attribute close to $1 million ransom that was paid to that wallet address. So you have, in that instance, you have a smoking gun and able to attribute some additional to that person, because as we all know, white collar crimes generally carry the same penalties as your more violent crimes. Again, so that was one of the examples. Another example of the JIOC in our BEC desk is this happens on a weekly basis, folks. Companies, CEOs, financial crimes investigators from payment card companies, banks, financial institutions across the board call the JIOC to help facilitate the financial, the kill chain, because obviously once the money starts to flow, if you wait days, and the hours matter, days matter, but if you wait days, it becomes increasingly more difficult for that money to be returned. So what we do is we facilitate kill chains, reverse funds to go back to financial institutions, victims, so on and so forth, because at the end of the day, even if we can't provide any attribution, we like to make sure we keep that money out of the hands of the bad guys, because we know they're going to use those illicit funds to continue to commit more criminal activities. Also, in addition to the JIOC, some other resources that we did not have before, going back to that undercover platform or undercover activities I talked about before, we actually have undercover platforms that we use outside of our normal network in order to engage criminal elements, because obviously you can't do that kind of stuff on your normal work computer. That would you can barely play fantasy football on your normal work computer. So obviously engaging bad guys is a no-go. In addition to the JIOC, the other cyber assets we brought on board are financial analysts. I talked before about the aspect of chasing the digital currency. Obviously, criminals are going to exploit the anonymity and the how hard it is to trace that money. So what we have to do in law enforcement is stay on top of that, using those real life resources we have to bring them to justice. We've heard the term partnerships a lot today. The Secret Service, again, small agency, we don't have the resources to do everything alone. Takes a whole of government approach, whole of community approach. That's why we try to expand our group of, or team of 9,000 plus task force partners on a daily basis. We don't own helicopters, but when we come to your district, they're helicopters. We don't own motorcycles outside of the National Capital Region, but when we come to your district, you see motorcycles. That's because folks like Burke have to go out and establish those relationships and keep them vibrant, so that when the protectees come in town, we are in a position to get that support to keep the protectees safe. On the same token, it's our job to reach out to you, educate the folks through the task forces, so that we're resilient and that we're doing everything we can do up front to avoid being victimized. We're highly dependent on those partnerships, and very rarely do we have a significant investigation that doesn't entail or involve our partners. One of the examples of that, Cyburgh talked about a few minutes ago, the NCIJTF, working with the financial payment systems and the financial institutions. The Secret Service, for those of you that don't know, even though we were known for the protection piece, most of our folks that leave the agency, they end up working for financial institutions or payment card industry companies. So that should be a major indicator that even though our brand is something else, we obviously, like Mr. McAleer said before, punch above our weight class when it comes to working with financial payment systems and the like. We ask a lot of our police partners, as I mentioned several times during the speech. We ask them for a bunch of people to help us secure sites and highways. And one of the things we give back is through the NCFI that Mr. Burke spoke about a few minutes ago. We trained, over 10,000 since we opened in 2008, local law enforcement officials, judicial officials, prosecutors, so that we as a whole of government can fight the opposition together. Before I finish up, I just want to say one thing about Pittsburgh. I got two great buddies on the job. They're Pittsburgh natives. One of them actually passed away this past January after fighting lung cancer. One guy went to Union High School there in Newcastle, and the other guy went to Westinghouse High School in Homewood. One thing I'll say about these guys is they're both tough guys, but they're also both very sharp technical guys. And I think about it from the standpoint of when people around the country think about Pittsburgh, we think about the terrible towels and the and the tough guy mantra of the Pittsburgh Steelers. So what I want you to do is just keep in mind, even though the Secret Service is primarily known for its protective mission, we're pretty robust when it comes to criminal investigations, especially of a contemporary and cyber nature. I'll kick it. Are you there, Tim?
I'm here.
Yeah.
All right.
So David, I'm going to jump in. I'm going to use you. We need you as one of our, marketing mascots. So I'm going to circle back with you on that. So Tim.
Thanks again, Dave. I'm just going to pick up where Dave left off. Obviously, I talked a little bit about our task force footprint here in Pittsburgh and our area of operation here. So along with our 27 task force partners, we also have partners in the private sector and academia as well. Excuse me one second. We work a whole gamut of cyber financial criminal cases here in Pittsburgh. Just over the past year, we've worked business email compromise cases, account takeovers, point of sale breaches, ransomware cases. We do get involved in child pornography cases when our partners bring it to us in terms of us basically doing the forensics on the devices. But other than that, we've gotten away from working those cases for the most part. Drug sales, we do get involved with if our partners bring us those cases as well in terms of examining equipment for the forensics. And then as Mr. McAleer talked about before, with COVID and with all of the fraud that has taken place, one of the things that Mr. Brady did under his leadership back in April of 2020, we were the first district that actually established a COVID-19 fraud task force. And we were one of the main partners in that task force. So two big cases that we worked, one of them being, we brought the first indictment and arrest of an individual who was selling COVID-19 fraudulent testing kits on the internet. We were actually the first ones to arrest somebody and actually bring charges against them for that and successfully prosecute them. And then we also indicted over 30 individuals that have been incarcerated in the Pennsylvania state prison system. Most of them are gang members that have been basically fraudulently applying for the PPP loan, the unemployment protection during COVID-19. So we've got at least 10 more cases in working those type of cases right now. Last week, if anybody here in Pittsburgh may have seen for the UPMC, if everybody remembers the UPMC hack that took place in 2014, we, along with our partners in the IRS, it was a case involving an individual that stole basically over 80,000 UPMC employees' W-2 information and then was fraudulently applying tax returns on their behalf. We hunted the individual for a long time. So with the IRS, we did most of the cyber forensics on that case, and we actually finally arrested the individual this past year, and he pled last week. His name was Justin Johnson. So that plea came down last week for the U.S. Attorney's Office. So that was a great win for us as well. And then finally, just to get back to what Mr. McAleer was talking about with the partnership and with basically trying to really maximize our impact with our partners. This past year, we've made a real effort through the support of the NCIJTF and through the U.S. Attorney's Office here to partner with the FBI here in Pittsburgh. So we are working much more closely with them to work the PTOC cases that Mr. Smith was talking about to work to go against these criminal organizations that are working on an international basis to really bring some impact to protect the United States and our financial infrastructure here, as well as Mr. Smith was talking about. So that's a quick rundown from what I'm doing here, or what we are doing here in Pittsburgh with our team here as well. So I know that there's probably some questions out there. I don't want to take too much more time, but that was just to give you a quick rundown of what we do locally here, and then obviously the Secret Service as a whole. So thank you, Audrey. And
thank you. I mean, David and Craig, there's so much to cover, but I want to give an opportunity to address a couple of the questions out there, if that's okay. You see one from Justin asks, can you read it? He's given how cybercrime cuts across orgs and industries. How does the U.S. Secret Service recruit the necessary technical skills and expertise? Because really everything that you're talking about, there's so many, domains of expertise in terms of getting into these careers. So obviously, forensic accounting, cyber forensic, languages, etc. Anyone want to take that on?
You know what? Dave, do you want to take it, or would you like me to? How about this, okay. Dave? Let me tee it up, and then Dave, you can finish.
All right.
All this comments. The first thing is, I'll can it this way: the Secret Service looks for best qualified candidates across a spectrum of abilities, and unique to us in the sense that, because we have this dual mission, we can really hire just about anybody who is a qualified and great candidate, from professional athletes all the way down to computer programmers and computer scientists and data scientists. We love to bring qualified and people with the experience already. But one of the things that we're really great at is developing people. And to tell you the truth, if looking back, a lot of our best cyber investigators are investigators who eventually learn cyber, because if you're my age, cybercrime wasn't the same when I started. To David's point, you know, it was credit cards and plastic. It was phone cloning, like all kinds of other crimes. But the ability and the capability that you develop by conducting investigations is great. And when you get a great investigator, you can teach a great investigator how to conduct cyber investigations. And then at the same time, we can take really smart people and teach them digital forensics and teach them network intrusions. And to the point, our NCFI, and this is important in the partnership world, our NCFI has trained nearly 10,000 state and local, trained and equipped approximately 10,000 state and local law enforcement personnel. So when you talk about that force multiplier, if you sprinkle 10,000 more people who are qualified and capable, who get to go back and get retrained whenever they need training, right? And it's feasible. That's a lot of people to do that job. And then when you think about the partnership that we have with our federal agencies at NCFTA, at the NCIJTF, and the detailees that we have spread out, we're always able to find people that are capable. And we encourage anybody who has an interest in cyber, an interest in law enforcement, and an interest in kind of protecting the nation in to some way to apply for a job.
And so what about the job openings, David? Is there more demand than what you can fill?
Well, hiring across law enforcement is not just a thing for the Secret Service these days. But when you offer, one of the things I always felt like was beneficial for the Secret Service, we have a lot of diversity within your career. You know, like you tell a young person these days, you're going to do the same thing for 25 years. They may not be too receptive to that, but within the Secret Service, you have, I'll give you the example of one of the young guys I managed when I was in LA as a supervisor, computer engineer degree. He ended up going to our SWAT team, and now he's on the president's detail, but he's looking to come back, work for Investigative Division soon, because his core was still computer engineering, and he still has a passion for that. So we just have to leverage the resources we have to the best of our ability. Like Mr. McAleer was saying, we've always hired a diverse group of folks from a background standpoint. We've hired teachers, botanists, you name it. But now that we have a new portion of or an emerging or evolving portion of our mission, we just have to use the folks that have a natural inclination to it. And in addition to that, we also incentivize. We have a cyber retention incentive program within the Secret Service. So there are additional resources for those who take a certain path, and folks do leverage that.
Well, that's exciting. So what about a quick question? Was the Secret Service able to recover the money from the individual whose Bitcoin wallet they recovered? Can you answer that?
Some of it, yes, some of it. And this is the thing though, but I'll add this to it. When you have a situation where you have someone with a smoking gun, you're seizing all of their resources. So the resources that were seized exceed the amount of the ransom, but it's just there's a process of asset forfeitures that you have to go through in order to get everything rectified. But yeah, we actually seized more than that specific ransom, but that specific ransom was just one of the several things that person was involved in.
And let's always be mindful that judicial process is always kind of served upon these people, and it is followed. So, you know, when we talk about, we can't just return money, and I think that we probably didn't express this enough. The Secret Service identified and either recovered or prevented the loss of nearly $2 billion.
Right.
And I think that this might have been a question that will come up, right, within kind of this whole PPE and EIDL fraud, right? So if you think about that, it's $2 billion of prevented losses of some sort, about 640 million, Dave, seized, somewhere in that ballpark. part of what we do is
Correct.
we return the money to the victims, whether it is a victim, end user victim, right? The person who should have received the payment, or if it's the state itself who it got interdicted and intercepted at some point before. So we return a lot of that money, but it's all based on judicial process and us making a case for seizing and making a case for returning the funds. I don't want people to think that we are in the Wild West just reaching into people's Bitcoin wallets and removing some funds, because that's what we are capable of doing. Everything follows that path. But yes, our goal is to make people whole, to make victims whole, and to make states whole as victims, and to take the illicit proceeds away from get rid of the benefit to the criminals.
Yeah,
that's benefit to the criminals, and we might be able to impact the conduct of these organizations.
And Ms. Russo, if I may add,
yes, absolutely.
in addition to the $2 billion Mr. McAleer spoke about, in those situations where we get from real human sources intelligence that we can turn around and give to financial institutions, healthcare institutions, that, hey, we're seeing this on your networks, go check it out. And then they go and let us know, hey, thank you for that. That's just prevention at its definition, right? I mean, the thing never happened, but the thing never happened because we got that intel from the real life sources, gave that information to the folks that were targeted, and they were able to rectify the issue before the subsequent ransom. So that happens often.
Yeah, I mean, people don't know what happens behind the scenes. So thank you, Greg and David, for clarifying that. We all have our own assumptions about how things work, and I know it's more complicated than that. Tim, did you want to add anything to this piece of the discussion?
Just in terms of what Greg was talking about and Dave was talking about before, in terms of the resources that we actually put into our own investigators, just to give you an idea of what we're talking about, the best cyber forensics investigator I have in my office right now is a former Pitt left tackle who's 6'8", 290 pounds, and he's an absolute killer when it comes to going after these cases. So he's fantastic. He's taken all the training that we could give him and then some, and it's just another example of us developing our people after we hire them as well, like Greg was saying. So
I think that's the key. I think that's the key in terms of everyone understanding what the opportunities really are and attracting people. So I think Monica, I know she's still on. We're getting close to 10 o'clock, and I want to be sensitive to time and to the program. So Monica?
Monica's not on, Audrey. It's
Yes.
all you for closing remarks, if you're ready to wrap it up.
I can wrap it up.
Mm-hmm.
Well, first of all, I want to thank the three of you gentlemen for joining us today. Really appreciate it. David, I think you have some network issues that I'm happy to have someone come and look at. And there's lots of people here. We lost you just for a moment, but no matter what, you did a great job in terms of extemporaneously making sure that we didn't miss a beat. So thank you for that. And Greg, thank you for setting the stage and for your own esteemed career. I mean, there's probably no other kind of career that would have this kind of diversity and this kind of transformation in the course of a very short period of time. So that makes each and every one of you highly desirable in terms of almost any place that you would want to work. The other thing that was really fascinating to me is this whole common theme that we also see with the vaccines is hesitancies. You all talked about this sort of trend of hesitancies, and it's not just towards the vaccine, but it's around disclosure and sharing. And I find that piece really interesting because having spent time trying to help people get vaccinated here and understanding what's going on in our neighborhoods, of the hesitancy as well and the trust. So it seems like that's sort of like a pervasive theme in the COVID era. And And I find that pretty fascinating. I think I want to do some work in trying to explore that and some of the parallels. But I am very proud of Pittsburgh. So Tim, I do want to tell you that I am, and I do think David articulated it very, very well. That the assets, anytime people come here and understand our capabilities in this space, people are really floored. We love to brag about it. And we know that we like to think we're the epicenter. And we're close enough to DC that our partnerships, you know, in terms of physical relationships, are easy to access. But the attraction of the amazing talent. And we've been lucky at the Tech Council to be behind the scenes when many of these catastrophes have occurred, particularly over the last decade, and in our manufacturing environments and, you know, across our CIO and CISO community. And we have seen the excellence in terms of the delivery there. So I can't, you know, thank you all enough. We will stay connected with the three of you. And you're probably fairly easy to find, but I know that, you know, you're pretty busy. We were planning on, and Monica, we were planning on taking a quick break and having networking, but there's just too much stuff to cover with the three of you. And I really, you know, applaud the time that you've taken with us, and I don't want to abuse that. But if there are ways that people want to get connected further, excuse me, what would be the best mechanisms for that for each of you? Excuse me.
Monica has my, hello, this is Monica,
Okay,
has
great.
my email. This is I work at headquarters. I have outreach under my portfolio, so I would probably be the best headquarters person when it comes to the Pittsburgh metropolitan area. You got Cyburgh there, but any local flavor. But
Yeah.
headquarters level will be me, and Monica could just reach out to me via email. I'm not going anywhere.
Thank you. Thanks, David. Thank you for being so wonderful and gracious with us. And Greg, what about you?
I can be reached in a variety of ways on a broad scale through the Secret Service and through, if you need my email address to be populated, I'm happy to do that.
Okay.
I'm sure many people in the community that we're talking to have LinkedIn profiles, so they can always check if they want to have conversations through LinkedIn, and I would encourage them to do that as well. You might not get the same responses from the official side or whatever, but that might be beneficial for everybody. And if I can, if we have about a minute and a half, it looks like Ben Williams at 9:54 asked how and why would an organization reach out to the Secret Service? And my answer to him is, you know what, if you're a victim of a crime and you need to get that taken care of, by all means, reach out to, I would say, if it's a ransomware or a cyber incident, reach out to whatever agency you're comfortable with. If you're a public company, call the Secret Service, call the FBI, call whoever you know, whatever your contact is, because our hopes is eventually that information will coalesce into the NCIJTF or into one of these CFTF, CTF partnerships that the FBI and the Secret Service has, or whatever other agencies, and they'll find the best player on that day to work that crime and to work that case. And sometimes, you know, it shifts and it goes to somebody else. And that's the way it works. So my answer is, if you've been a victim, don't remain a victim. Figure out where you need to go. Pick who you think is the best to start and who to notify, and then let the professionals work with you to find the best resolution to your situation.
Thanks, Greg. Tim, any wrap-up comments?
My contact information is available through Monica as well. And then obviously, even if locally here in Pittsburgh, just reaching out to our office, you can just go through the general number if that's what you find, or else Monica can pass out my information. Hopefully, with COVID restrictions starting to ease up, I'm more than happy to meet with people individually, with companies and everything to reach back out. That's part of our thing that for the cyber fraud task force that we do. We do have partnerships with the private sector, and we did back in the day. Within the past couple of years, we used to host our quarterly meetings where we would invite the private sector to come and make presentations as well. So hopefully we'll get back to doing that very shortly.
Yes, we will, Tim. We definitely will. They were wonderful and they're really important. So I also want to wrap up and thank you heard from our sponsors and our partner, Ethical Intruder, but I also want to thank again Scott Brady for helping us pull this panel together. He's been a good friend to us. And while he was at the Attorney General's office, he was really at the onset of breaking through many of the things of COVID, including these false tests and just so many other things. So thanks, Scott. And thanks to the three of you. So I guess, Monica, don't go away, right? Monica, you're going to jump in and tell me we're going to move into our next panel. We have a great crowd. And
So we're actually going to be ending this Zoom and jumping into a new one.
Right. Oh, okay.
So
we're going to end
I put the link in the chat, and I hope to see everyone at the next session starting at 10 a.m.
Thank you.
So thank you
All right,
all.
yeah, Audrey and
Thank
Tim, I'll be
you.
in Pittsburgh this weekend with
All
my
right,
daughter's volleyball team.
Oh, wait. So someone needs to contact me. You know how to find me.
Copy that.
Okay.
Thank you, Audrey. Thank you, everyone.
All
Thank you very much.
Take care.